Well, the establishment's lockdown narrative fell apart this week. A new Johns Hopkins study found that lockdowns had little to no effect on saving lives, showing just a 0.2% decrease in COVID-19 mortality on average across the US and Europe. So what did lockdowns accomplish? Well, they, quote, have contributed to reducing economic activity, raising unemployment, reducing schooling, causing political unrest, contributing to domestic violence, and undermining liberal democracy. The response to this pandemic has been the biggest public policy failure in history. And it wasn't just an innocent mistake. We knew they were wrong right from the start. We knew lockdowns were ineffective. We knew all of it was ineffective. The stupid cloth masks they made us wear, the pointless social distancing, 6 feet to try and stop a highly contagious airborne virus that could travel at least 5 times as far. The science was clear. But they ignored it. They pushed an old playbook for a different disaster, a playbook written by this person, Sarah Cody, Public Health Director of Santa Clara County here in California, who imposed the nation's first lockdown. Soon after, it was copied by the other Bay Area counties. Then, Governor Gavin Newsom shut down the whole of California, and before you know it, we'd shut down America. But Sarah Cody's lockdown manual was written after 9/11 with a potential bioterrorism attack in mind. And then you had Fauci at the federal level pushing the lockdown madness based on his experience with AIDS, an old playbook for a different disease. These experts were making it up as they went along. First, it was 15 days to slow the spread. Then it was controlling the number of cases, even though we knew from the start that the vast majority of cases are completely harmless. Then it was vaccine mandates, even though we knew from the start that the vaccines don't prevent infection or transmission. It was never about the science. It was about their addiction to the drama of it all, being the center of attention, the rush of blood to their heads as they realized they could micromanage us from morning to night. If they thought their stupid rules actually saved lives, they wouldn't have constantly broken them. Newsom at the French Laundry, Pelosi at the hair salon, London Breed at the nightclub feeling the spirit, rubbing it in our faces the football game last weekend, and now Stacey Abrams in the classroom. They know their rules are a joke, but the impact of their rules, that is not funny at all. Small businesses destroyed, kids' education set back by years, mental illness, substance abuse, domestic violence, child abuse. You did this to America. You, the lockdown lunatics. You, the media, who cheered it all on. The Newsoms, the Cuomos, the Maddows, the Guptas and Blitzers and Anderson Coopers, and all the rest of you lying and fear-mongering and pushing the misinformation that destroyed millions of lives. Yes, as you love to say about others, you all have blood on your hands. And please don't try to claim it was the fog of war, a new virus, we didn't know how to respond, we had to be cautious. That is BS. We knew how wrong the lockdowns were right from the start. As early as the first days of the pandemic, when we got the data from Italy, we could see that young, healthy people were barely at risk and that we could clearly identify those most vulnerable, the elderly, the overweight, those with existing medical conditions. That's why I said this right at the start. Let's come together to protect the vulnerable, stop the total shutdown for everyone, and start the total protection of the elderly and those most likely to need hospitalization. Don't turn a public health crisis into America's worst catastrophe. There was no need to close schools and workplaces and restaurants and bars and gyms. The whole thing was completely mental, totally counterproductive. That's why I said this right at the start. Our ruling class and their TV mouthpieces whipping up fear over this virus, they can afford an indefinite shutdown. Working Americans can't. They'll be crushed by it. You know that famous phrase, the cure is worse than the disease? That is exactly the territory we are hurtling towards. And President Trump said it himself that night. We cannot let the cure be worse than the problem itself. The dangerous idiots in the media said we were putting lives at risk. They clamored for the lockdowns to continue.
We find ourselves in the situation we are, partly because Donald Trump delivered us here, And now all indications are that he is very seriously considering making it much, much, much worse.
He feels that these draconian measures to restrict the economy may do more harm than good, even though that flies in the face of the health experts.
They couldn't have been more wrong. It was their lockdowns that did more harm than good. And now we have the evidence that proves it. So, how much time did the media spend covering the Johns Hopkins study that exposed their deadly lies? They completely ignored it. These people who constantly lecture us about following the data. What utter charlatans they are. They owe us an apology. They owe Trump an apology. And they owe this man an apology, pretty much the only governor who actually followed the science, who followed the data from the start, Florida's Ron DeSantis. We have to learn the lessons of this. Otherwise, it will happen all over again. The pandemic and the establishment's disastrous response. Never again must an out-of-control, arrogant medical bureaucrat like Fauci be allowed to evade the regulations that successive administrations put in place so that he could commission reckless research like the gain-of-function experiments in Wuhan that we now know are the most likely origin of the pandemic. Never again must we allow an out-of-control, arrogant medical establishment to push public policy on this scale without challenge or question. To quote the Johns Hopkins study, lockdown policies are ill-founded and should be rejected as a pandemic policy instrument. And today, we must not allow a complicit media to bury the findings that reveal their disgrace. That's why we must now have a truly independent 9/11 style commission to investigate with total transparency the origins of and our response to this pandemic. And if you think about the harm they did, the lives they ruined, the way they turned our society upside down. For the ringleaders, like Fauci, an investigation isn't enough. The people who did this to America should be put on trial. Follow us at Steve Hilton X and at NextRevFNC and share this message.